You are a cultural pioneer, or as I'd like to say, a culture-neer. You're daring to go where others aren't willing to go. The unknown doesn't scare you, it intrigues you. You're not satisfied with the status quo. Business as usual is not in your DNA. You're done with doing the same thing and expecting a different result. You're an explorer at heart and a trendsetter by nature. You were born with purpose, called to lead, destined to make a difference. You are a Culture-neer. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Culture-neer podcast. I'm your host, Terry Gwaltney. Today, I want us to dive in a little bit about some self-care. Title in this today would be, You Can't Pour from an Empty Cup. Think about that. That sounds pretty obvious. You have a pitcher. You're trying to fill glasses. The moment the pitcher is no longer full, or the moment the pitcher is empty, you can go through the motions, but you're not pouring anything. And I think sometimes from a leadership perspective, if we're not careful, we find ourselves in the same boat. This is important because we say this all the time, but it's so true. The culture can only be as healthy as the leader. And so if you're listening today, man, I've got a toxic culture, or I've got a problem in this one department, or, it seems like I have a trend going in the wrong direction here. I would encourage you to start as a leader, take responsibility, go look in the mirror. Like, am I unhealthy somewhere that I need to work on? Because my culture, again, will only be as healthy as my leader. And then maybe you need to go to your leadership in your different departments. How healthy are they? That's where I would start if I was going to begin to diagnose culture and what was going on. Of course, I do a complete assessment of my entire organization anonymously, and then begin to compare notes between, what your leaders put on that assessment, what you put on your own personal assessment of your culture, and then what the rest of your team put on that. And if you need help with that, go to terrygwaltney.com. One of the first pop-ups that'll happen on the website there will be an assessment that we offer for free that you can use. It's a great way to start, with your own culture. Hard to figure out where you're going if you don't first know where you're starting from and where you're at, and it's a great way to do that. So you can't lead others well if you're not leading yourself with intentionality and care. I'm going to repeat that today. You can't lead others well if you're not leading yourself with some intentionality and some care. Sometimes I think, we feel like, it's kind of selfish, to take time for myself. It's kind of, selfish for me to do this. And, I've got all these other demands and all these other people that I'm responsible for. No, it's actually being responsible, because if you don't have anything to give them and you're not healthy, you're not going to be around to serve them. You're not going to be showing up and giving them your best. So super important that you get these things in the proper order. Leadership begins within. Leadership begins within. So before you cast vision, solve a problem, or serve your team, guys, you got to steward your soul, your health, your mindset. Self-leadership is not selfish. It's essential for a sustainable, impactful leadership. And don't think that you're so noble and selfless that you run yourself in the ground, suffer from burnout, and your team is having to suffer because you're not around to lead, show up, and give your best. So how do I embrace this power of self-leadership? I'm going to give you a few things today. Number one, prioritize your inner health over your outer hustle. Prioritize your inner health over your outer hustle. In other words, don't confuse achievement with alignment. You may look successful on the outside, but if your soul is exhausted, the cracks are going to eventually show. You lead from wholeness, not burnout. And when you've pushed a little bit too hard, when you've put in just a few too many hours, you start getting short with the people that you care the most about. You start reacting instead of really responding. There's just certain characteristic traits that you probably already know about yourself. You need to look at those as warning signs. Whoa. Maybe I need to back up. Maybe we need to go out of town for the weekend. Maybe I just need to disconnect for a little bit. Maybe I don't need to be around humans at this point because I'm going to do more harm than I'm going to do good. That's what we're talking about. The second thing, prioritize obedience over ambition. Explain that a little bit. Not every opportunity is a calling in your life. Learning to say yes to what aligns with your purpose and no to what simply feeds your ego, super important. Fulfillment comes from obedience, not the applause of other people. And so what I'm saying is that sometimes we do things simply because of how other people make us feel, and it's an ego trip. That ego trip can be super costly. And it can cause you to live your life with some blinders, because eventually, big egos lead to big pride, and big pride leads to big blind spots. And nobody wants to follow somebody that's arrogant and full of themselves. There's not enough room for anybody else to kind of join the team when you find yourself in that situation. Be honest about about the weight you carry. I mean, I think this self-reflection and self-awareness is one of the most powerful things as a leader that we can walk in. Listen, expectations are heavy. Pressure is real. You're listening to this podcast today. You're probably hoping for some solutions that you can hear from somebody who's made some mistakes that's willing to pass that on. That's really kind of what this show is about. What can we glean from the people that we interview, and what can we share from the mistakes that we've made so others don't have to walk down the same road? Wherever you're at today, that was probably built on the shoulders of someone else that poured into you, shared with you, believed in you, modeled for you. Same thing we're trying to accomplish today. So listen, the pressure's real, but guys, you don't have to carry it all alone. I encourage you to invite some trusted voices into your leadership journey. If you've been making this trip all by yourself, convinced yourself that I'm just going to, when things get hard, I just pull up my bootstraps and I move on. You need that kind of tenacity, but that go it alone attitude is not sustainable. You need to invite some people that you trust for them to be able to speak into you, into your organization as you're on this journey, because it is a journey. Where you're at today might be great. There's sometimes if you go on a hike and you're not having to climb a hill, and there's very little resistance, and the road's really flat, and the path's straight and narrow, it's a lot easier than when you start climbing the hill and you have rocks that are moving and the grade becomes very, very steep and the conditions outside change and suddenly it starts to rain and now you're dealing with mud, and the journey is not nearly as fun, and it's a whole lot more challenging, and you're not making as much ground as you were. That's why you need those trusted voices in your life, not just when you have a problem. That's usually what forces us to go look for those. But you need them in the good times and the bad times. And they'll help you carry the weight. But you can't do that if you're not willing to be vulnerable. If you're not willing to admit that you don't have all the answers, sometimes you got to be willing to ask the questions. There's a certain amount of vulnerability that creates strength. And I encourage you to force yourself to be in that spot where you're willing to ask. The fourth thing, guys, you need to build a rhythm of rest and renewal. Figure out what that rhythm is for you. Do a little bit of reflection. Do you work better in the mornings? Or do you work better at night? Are you a morning person? Or are you a night person? Have you ever went to a coffee shop and realized that they hired somebody in the drive-thru that was not a morning person? And you're thinking, what in the world were they thinking? Now, this person showed up that morning. That person knew how to make coffee, but they didn't know how to interact with people. And so they missed a huge component of why they were hiring somebody to represent them in their brand, which was to create raving fans, which is to make customers fall in love with their service over and over again and endear them to their heart. And all that was missing because they had an evening person, a late night owl, working as a morning person. You need to figure out what this is for you. Why? Because that becomes a rhythm. Your most important decisions need to be made when you're at your best, not when you're at your worst. I'm a morning person, so I don't need to be making some of my best decisions at 11 o'clock at night. I may be awake at 11 o'clock at night, but I am definitely not going to be my best. That's not where I'm going to interact the best. That's not where I'm going to be the sharpest. What is that for you? Figure out what that rhythm is. Maybe you're a hard charging 6 day a week, or when you have to be, you can go 7 days a week, for a month. But you realize when I do that for more than a month and that season goes beyond that, I'm up against the wall, and it takes me a week to recuperate. Figure out what your rhythm is, and then adjust that. Build in that time for rest and renewal. Again, that is not selfishness. That is replenishment. That is wisdom. That is bringing your best. That is being in the game for the long haul. Overcommitment isn't a badge of honor. Real leaders rest with intention so they can show up energized, clear-minded, and really anchored in purpose. You can't do that if you're running yourself ragged. So look at it as an investment. I know for people probably like me, it has to be, I'm purpose-driven. And it's difficult to disconnect. And so if that's you, create a purpose. I'm not disconnecting just to go play tennis or play golf or just to fish. If you have to convince yourself there's a bigger reason outside of that being your hobby and you enjoy it, make the purpose about, I'm doing this intentionally so I can go back and be myself next week. So I can push this thing just a little bit further and a little bit harder once I'm relaxed and, chilled out a little bit and come back, refurbished. Whatever you got to tell yourself, importance is make time for that rest, make time for that renewal. Again, you can't pour from an empty cup. And so don't get so focused on the fact that my job is to fill glasses that you forget to fill the pitcher. Only you can fill the pitcher. In the moments it's empty, you're just simply going through the motions. You're not refreshing anybody. You're not quenching thirst for anybody. You're not giving anybody any kind of nourishment. You're just going through the motions. And sometimes, too many times, I've seen myself and others be in that leadership role. We're still going through the motions and we're exerting just as much energy. The problem is we're tapped out. There's nothing coming out of the pitcher. Renewal, refreshment, taking that time, figure out what your rhythm is, make time for that. I can't afford to. You can't afford not to. You don't have to renew yourself at a 5-star resort all the time. Sometimes you just need to go out and disconnect, turn the TV off, maybe sit in the woods, get in your hammock, go sit in a park, do something where you just disconnect, shut off, your technology, for a period of time and just renew yourself. Get your mind fresh. You just got to be intentional about it. And then the rhythm part comes because you become disciplined about it. Once you do it a couple of times, you see the benefits. It encourages you like, wow, I didn't think I could afford to take that time off, but I realized I was able to do twice as much when I went back after taking that time off because I just came back refreshed. And then it really begins to encourage you to give yourself permission to search for those rhythms and force yourself into them intentionally. One of the best ways, guys, to do this over the long haul is you need to learn to master your time. One or two things are going to happen. Time is going to master you, or you're going to master your time. That's a decision. So you don't need more time to work on your culture. You just need more focus on what truly matters. Because you're not going to get more than 24 hours a day. So how do I squeeze more out of that? I focus on what truly matters. And you can apply that principle personally, and you can apply that principle professionally. But either way, you have to do it intentionally. And then you have to do it over and over and over again if you want to see the kind of multiplied results. If you're constantly feeling overwhelmed, stretched too thin, like there's never enough of you to go around, the issue probably isn't time. It's how you're managing it. Great leaders don't try to do everything. They focus on the right things. And so as a leader, many times you're the one that has to figure out what the right thing is. You're helping people on your team figure out what the right thing is. You're paying them, so you're prioritizing for them what's most important to you. Who's doing that for you? You need to be intentional. That is a great portion of being a leader, is taking the time to focus on the right things. And I think focus is the key word. We look at a lot of stuff, but when you focus in on one thing, you begin to see the details. Everything else kind of blurs out, and now you have something that you're shooting for. If you've picked up a gun, you don't just, because I have a shotgun that's going to have a pattern that's going to shoot 3 foot wide, just point in the direction of whatever I'm shooting at. You still take the bead or the scope on that gun and you point it exactly what you're trying to shoot at, and you focus in on that. It's the same way. This is how you have to hone in your leadership. It's not a shotgun and hope for the best. It's laser focused. So I'm removing distractions. So I'm moving in the direction that I need to be moving in. That's what great leaders do. And you have the potential to be a great leader. You just have to create good habits in order to be able to do that. So here's how you can categorize some of the tasks maybe that take control of all of our time. And I'm definitely not telling you this because I'm the master of this. I'm telling you this because I'm a student of this. It's helped me survive to get to where I'm at, and I know I have to do a much better job to get to where I want to go. And I think that probably could be said of everybody that's listening or watching the show today. So, tier 1, what only you can do. So these are going to be your highest value tasks that are on your list. Things that align with your strengths, with your responsibilities, with your leadership role. Prioritize these above everything else. There's a lot of things that you do, but what are the things that only you can do? Those need to be the things that rise to the top of the list. Those begin to show you that's what the priority is. The second thing, this is kind of like tier 2. What can others do on my team with some guidance? I just came back from a conference in Utah, and I heard somebody say this, and it wasn't new, but it was a great reminder. He said, I had a hard time letting go as we were growing. He said, but man, what I figured out is if I can find somebody that can do what I was doing 80% as good as I can do, it's a win. Because I can move that off my plate and focus on something else. And part of that something else is raising up another leadership team. And so what if you had 2 people that could do what you do 80% as good? Maybe not 100%, but 80% as good as you could do it. That's 160% capacity now just because of 2 people. And that's a great reminder. So tier 2 is like, what else is on my list that's consuming my time that other people could do with just some of my guidance? These tasks still matter, but they don't require your full attention. So you train and empower your team to handle them effectively. This is how you begin to manage your time instead of your time managing you. Tier 3, what someone else should be doing. There's just some things that are not beneath you, but there's just some things that don't make sense that you should be doing. Again, because there's some things that are not going to get done that only you can do. So why are you doing these things that really anybody on your team could do? And they need the experience doing that anyway. So if the task isn't a great use of your time, delegate it. The best leaders trust their team and they don't hold on to work that others are capable of managing. Again, get your ego out of the way. Quit being so self-reliant, and just trust other people. Tier 4, what doesn't matter probably can be eliminated. So there may be some of those things that maybe should just come off your list. Not everything deserves your energy. Identify those things that are distraction, those things that are just busy work, low impact activities. Just cut them out completely. Remove them off the list. And this is not something you do once. This is something you have to go back and repeat and repeat and repeat because your tasks are changing. The things that are added to your list, your responsibilities. Responsibilities don't necessarily always mean priorities. And so they make the list. Okay, should they come off the list? Should I delegate that? Should this be something that I do first? It's just a process you're going to work through. It's kind of like what we were talking about earlier. It's a little bit of a rhythm. Guys, leaders who control their time, they control their future. Don't forget that. Leaders who control their time control their future. So if you don't manage your time, it's going to manage you. The best leaders work with intention. They focus on impact, and they build teams intentionally that help carry the load. If you're not doing that, you need to start that today. You need to ask yourself, what tasks do I need to delegate, eliminate, or refocus on? And then free yourselves from being overwhelmed and What'll happen is you'll see that you're leading with a whole lot more clarity, which in turn will raise your leadership influence with the people that you're already leading. Focus over busyness. Again, the problem isn't a lack of time. It's usually a lack of focus. Guys, leaders feel overwhelmed, constantly running from task to task, yet never making any real progress. You ever feel that way? What'd you do today? Man, I was busy. No, what'd you do today? And then you start dissecting what you did, and it's like a whole lot of nothing. Well, didn't you have a lot to do? Yeah. Well, why didn't you do that? Because you let somebody else manage your time, and you didn't hold on to and fight kind of for each minute. You didn't really focus on what mattered. You just kind of dealt with whatever happened at the moment. If you want to be your most productive and if you want this, let me rephrase that. If you want this to be your most impactful and productive year of your life, which should be our goal each and every day, each and every year, you got to shift from busyness to more of this intentional focus. And I'm going to close this out with this. Here's how you can sharpen that focus and lead with just a little bit more clarity. Identify what your true goals are. Not everything on your to-do list, again, is important. Maybe start with define your top 3 priorities. They will drive the most meaningful results anyway. So what's the 3 most important things I have to get done before I leave today? Second, destroy the distractions. And sometimes it's so simple. Well, emails, notifications, your phone going off, your social media, unnecessary meetings that just drain your energy. Set boundaries. Create a more focused work time. Protect your most important tasks. I'm reminded in our organization, my oldest son has been here along my side since day one. And I've watched him as we've scaled our business from our first year to last year being 5 times, a little over 5 times what it was the first year we were in business. This is the first time in the last 2 weeks in 17 years that we've added anybody in his department. But what he's done is he's figured out some of his rhythms. He's got an incredible work ethic. He's got a good memory. And he realized he will start his day sometimes 3 hours before anybody else ever comes into the office. Now, what they see is like, well, he's not around here at 5 o'clock. Well, no, because he was in there at 4:30 or he was in there at 5, and he may have already been sending emails and looking at stuff before he ever left his house. But what he realized is I can get more done in those 2 hours with no phone calls coming in, nobody in the office, nobody bothering me. It's a highly, highly productive time. And he's learned to squeeze out minutes as he's went along. And he's been able to stretch a department that probably should have had 3 and 4 full-time people in it. He's been able to do it by himself and still keep his sanity, still show up and be a husband, and still show up and be a dad to his kids. And so that takes focus. That takes intentionality. So destroy the distractions. Third thing, learn to say no more often. Every yes to something that's unimportant is a no to something that is vital. Think about that. Train yourself to, okay, I'm about to say yes to something. You may have a personality where you're a real people pleaser. You just really want to help people. You want to serve people. And so when somebody says, well, and it's something you can do, well, I can do that. Yeah, I'll come over and do that. I'll be there on the weekend. I'll stay late tonight. Well, problem is once you do that 3 and 4 times, now you're wondering, how am I going to get the stuff done that I'm responsible for? And if we're not careful, our zeal to serve and help and please other people, if we're not careful when we overdo it, now we become resentful towards the people that never ask us for help, that we volunteered to help and to serve and to show up. Why? Because we've overcommitted. And now we're feeling the pressure and the load of all this other stuff that only we can do, that now we don't have time to do. It becomes this vicious circle. So just learn to say no more often. You have to say yes to everything. And I would encourage you to get in a rhythm where you can work in a deep focus mode. I mean, where you're just focused. And there may be a time where the door needs to shut. There may be a time you shoot a text and like, hey, if you need something, let me know, honey, because the next 2 hours, I need to be focused. And I've worked around some people that, they can't go 30 seconds without their spouse texting them. And it breaks your focus in some of the things you're doing. Does that mean you should never hear from your spouse? No, there can be two extremes to that. But what I'm saying is if you need to get stuff done, sometimes you get in a rhythm and you start a momentum and then you're pulled back because of a distraction. And you jump start again, you're pulled back from a distraction. Once you utilize the energy to get that train moving, don't back off. You just keep moving. And that momentum then begins to work for you. So figure out a way to work in that deep focus mode. Block out that time that is uninterrupted, high impact work. Turn off the distractions, dedicate the time. That's truly going to move the needle. You'll be glad you did later on in the week, later on in the month, later on in your career. I would encourage you to lead with clarity. You know why? Your team deserves it. Your team needs focus too. You need to communicate a clear vision. You need to set measurable goals. You need to assure everyone is in line to what matters most. And that's really your job as the leader. You can't do that if you don't have clarity, and you can't have clarity if you don't have focus. And so this managing your time. Some people can be very successful on their own, but they can't seem to find the same success when they're promoted from doing well on their individual efforts, when they're promoted to having to manage other people. And it's because they haven't learned some of the stuff that we're talking about. And this is where you have to be able to show up as your best, because I have to be able to lead with clarity, and I can't do that if I'm not managing my time well. Because eventually I'll reach the end of my ability to manage responsibilities. At some point I have to raise leaders, and I have to move the needle with vision and clarity and instruction and correction, not just with what physically I can do and accomplish, because I will soon run out of that time. Great leaders don't just fill their time. I really believe they maximize it. Focus isn't about doing more. It's about doing the right things with discipline, and it's about doing the right things with intentionality. So ask yourself today, am I being productive or just busy? And then I encourage you, choose focus, eliminate distractions, and lead with clarity. Remember, guys, culture is only as healthy as the leader. We'll see you next time on the Culture-neer podcast.
Thank you for joining us on Culture-neer, where every episode is a step forward on your leadership journey. We hope today's conversation sparked new insights and added real value to your life, empowering you to lead with greater strength and purpose. If you enjoyed what you heard, please connect with us. Follow our Facebook and Instagram pages, subscribe to our YouTube channel for exclusive content, and give us a rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Your support helps us grow our community and continue delivering conversations that matter. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, keep striving, keep leading, and keep inspiring.